And we're back. You are listening to the Talking Boxing with Billy C. Show. You're watching us on the Fight Now television channel. Glad you could join us. What? You don't have Fight Now? You don't have Fight Now on your sports channel lineup? Well, you need to call your local television provider, whether it's satellite dish or cable, and tell them you want Fight Now right now. It's that simple. Pick up the phone and call for all the information about the channel. You can find it on their website, www.fightnow.com. Speaking of now, it's that time again. It's time for another heavyweight spotlight. I can't even talk this morning. Starring the man himself, Tony Triem. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Billy. See, how are you?
You're making me nervous. I can't even talk. You know. I mean, what is it? What did you got your henchmen outside or what, man?
I've got my cigar lit, and I got my cup of coffee here, and I'm ready to rock and roll, dude.
There we go. We're doing another heavyweight spotlight. In case you guys have missed it, Tony and I talk about the heavyweight division and the history of the heavyweight division. And today we decided to talk about a fighter that is virtually forgotten today. His name is Elmer Ray, and he's in the history books, or at least some of them, as violent Elmer Ray. But even that's it's up for debate. Why don't you tell us about this guy, man? Who was Elmer Ray?
Billy, this is an interesting guy. And the other day when you called me and you asked me if I knew of Elmer Ray and you wanted to talk about him, I thought, yeah, that'd be a good subject. And as I got to looking around and things, there's a lot of things written on Elmer that in different sources that don't make a lot of sense on him. One source says one thing, another source says another thing. So it's going to be an interesting concept today, and I'm probably going to learn more than I tell the listeners about Elmer Ray as we go through this. He was a vicious hitter. He was best known for his battle royales back in the day because they used that back in the South for pre-fight entertainment for the fight crowds. But he's best known in those battle royals. He won most. He won 61 of them. He had a neat style in that. In winning them, he would when the bell would ring, he'd fall to the floor, crawl to a corner, put his back against the corner, and take them on, and take them all on, and he'd win them. But he's best known for his fights with the future heavyweight champs of Ezra Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott.
Well, let me ask you a question before we talk about that. Now, you were able to find records on Elmer Ray's battle royale career. You mentioned that from your research, you found that he participated in 60. Is that what you said?
What I found, and again, it's discriminating, and I guess discriminating is not the word. Different sources say different things about him. Yes, they say he started his career as a fighter in battle royales in the South,
right?
And that was a popular thing back in the day. You'd get, it's kind of like an MMA fight, I guess, is the way you'd explain it. You put 6 men in the ring, and the winner take all. Well, and what I have found about Elmer, that he won 60 of those battle royales by his technique of falling to the floor when the bell rang and putting his back to the wall, because he was such a strong, heavy hitter. I mean, he hit hard.
I see.
And he was feared by many fighters of his day. They wouldn't fight him.
Well,
and they referred to him as the modern Sam Langford.
Wow. Well, that's a great accolade, and for all the viewers and listeners out there that don't understand what we're talking about with battle royales, it was an extremely it was a prejudiced thing. Normally, what they would do on as a preliminary bouts prior to the main fights of the evening is they would generally put black fighters in the ring all together. and in most cases blindfold them. And they would have to fight, and the last one standing would win. And what do they win? Well, the spectators would throw coins at them, and they would get to collect that money. So it was a pretty a racist move, to be honest with you. But boxing was different back then, Tony, and obviously we know today, and you and myself both, and many other people obviously are not happy with the history part of how these black American fighters were treated. But nonetheless, Elmer Ray made his name in these battle royales and actually started boxing early in his life. I think he was still a teenager when he turned pro in 1935. Is that true?
Well, again, different sources say different things, and this is, I'm not sure if he turned pro at 16. Some sources say yes, he did. Others say he didn't start until he was in his late 20s, early 30s before he got out of the battle royale scene and was able to go into professional boxing as a prize fighter, as we know fighters today. So I'm not sure on that, Bill. You tell me. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he was already considered old when he was in his mid to late 30s in his last fight when he fought John Holman in 1949. So he was already considered old. So if he started his pro career, let's say in 1935, so he went from 1935 to 1949 as fighting singles matches, so to speak. I had never seen that, where he fought 60 or had 60 wins alone in these battle royales. That could mean this poor guy started out when he was just a young person, because that's a lot of fight. I mean, even somebody that's fighting twice a month, I mean, that's a lot of battle royales, man.
Well, some sources say he started at 16.
Okay.
Now, again, some sources say that. Other sources say differently. So I'm assuming, and you know what that means.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that this battle royale nonsense that they pitted him in, he was a young teenager when he started that, and so I'm going to go along with him being a young man to answer your question at 16.
Well, let's
in the boxing rings, but I don't know if that's true though.
Let's do this. Let's start off. He was technically born in 1911, but even that has got some discrepancies. There's been reports.
Well, does it ever?
Yeah, they have reports of him being born anywhere from 1910 all the way up to 1914, and one of the problems with that I found was that there was no record of his birth. Now, he was born in, according to most, Federal Point, Florida. And there was no record of his birth except for when he was born. His parents used to carve the kids' names into a tree, and the tree burned. Yeah, and the tree burned down, so nobody had proof
of a forest fire.
Yeah,
and they were potato farmers.
Right, he was a potato farmer. So, and it may seem outrageous today, but I look at it this way, Tony. It wasn't that long ago. 100 years is a long time for us, in terms of life, but 100 years
in the 30s and in early 40s.
Well, I'm saying when he was born in let's say 1911, that's roughly 100 years ago. To go from carving, you have a kid and you carve the record of his existence into a tree, versus today.
That's pretty primitive. Man.
It is. It almost seems. It almost seems unbelievable. Well, let's go to what we do know. We do know that on record, he started out his professional boxing career in 1935 with a loss against Willie Bush. As a matter of fact, his first 6 fights, according to BoxRec, he didn't fare too well. He was 1 win, 3 losses, and 1 draw. But he started to develop as a knockout puncher. What can you tell us about his style? Who could we, as close as possible, compare him to with a more known fighter
of today?
Well, of any era that we may know of.
Well, he he was such a hard hitter with either hand, and he had a crouching boxing style, and he bobbed and he weaved and stuff that that's not seen in a lot of fights today. They don't have the head movement and the bobbing and weaving that he did back in the day. And I'm not putting any fighters down when I say that. Comparing him today with an era. He was so feared because of his hitting power. So many guys wouldn't fight him. To compare him to someone, I guess a Sam Langford you could compare him to. You could compare him to, moving up, you could compare him to with hitting power, a Marciano. You could compare him to a George Foreman with hitting power. I guess in that area, you can compare him that way because he's so strong.
Well, he obviously had some pop because in 2003, the Ring magazine ranked him in the top 100 power punchers of all time, and he fared 44. Pretty well at number 44. Right, exactly. Pretty good. All right, well, his most known fights, and because of the color of his skin, he was prevented, and like we said, this isn't. Tony mentioned Sam Langford, during Jack Johnson era and everything else. This is the turn of the century, 1900. This was before Elmer Ray was even born. Elmer Ray fought in a time when Joe Louis was a world champion, so black fighters did get some opportunity, but it was chosen by the powers that be, and because of the color of his skin, he didn't ever get a world title shot, but yet he beat a lot of top fighters. Most known fighters were his battles with his multi-fight battles with Ezra Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott. Why don't you tell us about those?
Well, like you mentioned, he never fought for a heavyweight championship, but he did have some memorable fights with Ezra Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott. In the 3 fights with Walcott, Ray suffered a 3-round knockout in 37. He rebounded and outported Walcott in 46, and lost the third bid with he lost the third fight by a split decision in 1947. And there's a lot of, from what I can understand, and maybe you can enlighten us on this, Billy, that third fight, when he lost that split decision, a lot of people in the crowd thought that Elmer actually won that fight, that Walcott didn't. And I wanted to look up Jim Curl's book, The Jersey Joe Walcott. I read the book, but I don't remember anything said about it in the book. And I wanted, before we had the show, and I didn't have time, to find out what Jim said in the Walcott book about his fight with Violent Ray. Curl.
Curl's going to say, "Oh, Walcott killed him." You
can't believe
but, that guy.
I was hoping he would say something, in the fact that this fight was really controversial. That a lot of people felt it was a lot closer than what the judges scored it, and I don't know what the scorecard was. I never have seen that, but they say that Walcott really was taking a beating in that fight, and that Elmer Ray actually won it.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't give it to him because Walcott was going to fight for the championship, and they wouldn't let Ray have it. And again, these are sources. There's mixed sources, and so it's confusing with Elmer Ray. So I'm asking the question to you: what have you heard, or what do you know about the fight with Walcott? The third one especially, because that's the one that seems to be the most questionable one that I've found out about.
Well, the first one was case closed. He was knocked out, So
right.
So Walcott got the best. But the other two, even though Elmer Ray did on the record books get the split decision win and then lost the majority decision, I, like you, read every account that I read on those fights was that Elmer Ray was ripped off. And the bottom line was that this was supposed to be a catapult fight at a shot for a title, and Elmer Ray thought that all his chances to fight for a world title were lost until he got his opportunity against Ezra Charles. The funny thing about the Ezra Charles fights was that it was almost the same story. They were both close fights. I believe both of them were split decisions. And no, actually, the second fight was a knockout loss. But the split decision fight with Ezra Charles, a lot of people felt that Ezra Charles dominated him with speed and landing punches. One writer wrote at will, but yet Elmer Ray got a split decision win in that one. So it's almost like the reverse happened with the Ezra Charles fights as happened with the Jersey Joe Walcott fight.
And so, the accounts are different in almost everything, they write about him, and they talk about him. He had guaranteed fights. He offered guaranteed fights to Arturo Godoy and Tommy Molino, and they rejected them for big fights at the Madison Square Garden. And the only person that would actually fight him, and this is, again, they're drawing the cutter line here, and I hate that, as you do in boxing, but it's part of the history. There's nothing we can do about it. But the only white man that would fight him that I could find out about, and maybe you can enlighten us with more, is Lee Savoll. And, Of course, he knocked Savoll out in the second round of their contest. But Joe Baskey wouldn't fight him. Lou Nova wouldn't fight him. Molino Bettina wouldn't fight him. Jimmy Bivens, a great black fighter, wouldn't fight him because of his power and knockout skill. He was almost like everybody was afraid of him until he got the chance to become the number one contender, and then losing that very quickly because of Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott. So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he was a longtime contender. He worked his way up, and Lee Savoll, people, when you mention Lee Savoll's name, you think of Rocky Marciano. Well, when he stepped in and fought, when he fought Elmer Ray in 1946, the guy had an 89-31-1 record. I mean, this guy was a no-joke fighter, no question about that. And there was several fighters along that line that he fought and was still very competitive with. One that sticks out for me is Sid Peaks, who he fought one of his last professional fights, which incidentally, 1949 was his last year. And as a guy that's winding down his career, who was considered old, in 1949 he fought Sid Peaks in February 8th. Sid Peaks was 30-7 at the time. He knocks this guy out in 9 rounds. And for an old fighter, he didn't wait too long to fight again because he fought Kid Riviera a couple of weeks later on December 22nd. And then 2 weeks after that, he fights his last professional fight against John Holman, who was a young up-and-coming fighter. And at that time, Elmer Ray decided to hang him up. He never got a chance at a world title after he lost to Ezra Charles. That was a fight that was supposed to get somebody a shot at a title, and obviously it didn't go to Elmer Ray. The thing about Elmer that I don't know about is what happened to him, and I don't know if a lot of people. I think that's the big mystery. Some people say he went back to Florida. There's other reports that said he moved out to California. We know that he died in 1987 at 76 years old. But Tony, I have no idea what was Elmer Ray's life after boxing. Did he do well in life? Did he do badly? I mean, were you able to find anything?
No, I wasn't, Bill. The only thing I did find that he did die in California in Los Angeles County. Where in Los Angeles County, I couldn't find. You're correct on his age that you mentioned of his death, but that's all I can find on his death. As far as what he did when he left the ring, it's a mystery still today. I don't know. I have no clue.
It boggles my mind to look at a guy like Elmer Ray that has the reputation that he had. And I know Tony and I are trying to point out some things about this guy and help you guys, the viewers and listeners, learn a little about him. What we can bottom line tell you is that he was a fantastic fighter. I mean, his career record was 85 wins, 63 coming by knockout, 17 losses, 5 draws. He had 595 rounds as a professional, but nobody knows anything about this guy. Nobody knows where he actually came from. Nobody knows where he went, but yet he lived until he was 76 years old. it boggles my mind, and this wasn't that long ago. He ended his career in just shy of 1950, which is 60 years ago, 63 years ago. He lived through the late 80s, 1987, and no one knows anything about the guy. It boggles my mind, Tony, how we can find out about most people, what color shoes they wore, where they were born, who they went to school with. And this is a guy who was an important part of boxing history that nobody kept track of this guy. I mean, what kind of society are we that we have no idea? And this isn't a guy that was born in the 1800s. This isn't my guy Tom Molyneux that I couldn't find any information on. This was a guy born in 1911. This was a guy that fought in the 30s. That we're keeping records, and we had a protocol where we filed that we followed in everyday life. Yet Elmer Ray seems to have been protected from that. We know nothing about this guy. And you don't say. Looks like we lost Tony. I will get him back right here, and we'll see what happens. But it just bothers me that after all of this time, you still don't know anything about a guy like Elmer Ray. Is he a Hall of Famer? No, he's not a Hall of Famer. Never was in the Hall of Fame. Never was inducted into any Hall of Fame. Although he was inducted into the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame, from what I understand. So that I know he got inducted. He was considered a household name during the time when he fought, but nobody knows about him. They say he moved to California after his career was over, but there's really no exact proof of that. There was the only proof of his birth was, like we said, when his parents carved his name in the tree. We got Tony back here. Sorry about that, my man. I'm assuming you heard everything I said, and I just didn't hear you. It just boggles my mind that there's virtually no information about this guy since his retirement, which was right around 1950. Come on, man.
You're right. This is, in today's world, we should be able to find out anything we want to know about anybody easily.
You would think.
Are you there?
Yeah, you would think.
Okay.
You would think, and you would think that he had to have had a job someplace, and he had to have a career. I mean, when he was 37 years old and he quits, which they considered him old and washed up at 37. Where did he go for the next 40 years? I don't understand. If he moved out,
I don't know. They talk about him going to San Diego to fight Turkey Thomas, and he stayed in California. Now, whether he stayed in San Diego or not, I don't know. It doesn't tell that. And it's like you, it boggles my mind that a man of his era, a great prize fighter, he was feared, revered in the ring, and we can't find much out about him. And when you was mentioning his record, other sources say he had 84 wins. You say he had 85. Some sources say he had 63 knockouts. Other sources say what you said. Some sources say he had 15 losses. He was knocked out 7 times. Some sources say he had 104 fights. Other sources say he had 108 fights. Some sources say Joe Louis absolutely would not fight him, had nothing to do with him, would not even do exhibitions, but yet in his record it shows where he had several exhibitions with Joe Louis. What is true and what isn't true about this great fighter, Billy, is still a question and a mystery, and it's something I'm going to dig into because of you and you bringing him back to light. He's a fighter that I haven't thought about in years, and I really want to find out about this guy because he's something else.
We should write a book about him because I think that he's a guy that deserves to look into some information, see if we can get some film on him. I've never seen any footage of him. I've only read.
There is no film on him. I've checked. There is no film on him, and if there was, it was destroyed, and I don't know if that's true either.
Yeah, well, he was inducted into the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame in 2010, so maybe they got some info. Even his nickname it comes under question.
The subject.
So, some say Violent Kid Ray. Some people say it was Violent Ray. Some say Kid Violent, and no Elmer. So it was Kid Violent Ray and not Elmer Violent Ray. And some sources say it wasn't even violent; it was violet, as in the color. So, I don't know. I mean, all I do know, and it's funny because we were on the show the other day and talking about an email, and someone was trying to tell me that Joe Louis was a bum, referred to Joe Louis as a bum. And I'm like, huh? And they go, yeah, I went to BoxRec. He fought all these bums, and you're looking at these guys, and he mentioned Darcy, and what kind of fighter is Darcy? 50 and 33, 50 wins, 33 losses, and 33 draws. That's a bum. I go, really? That's a bum? I don't know about that. It's kind of comical. And when you do look at things like that, Tony, when you're looking at just records, I'll admit when you look at a guy like Vladimir or Vitaly Klitschko, it is impressive to see their numbers. It is impressive to see the fighters that they fight are undefeated and have 30 fights and 1 loss. And on paper, it looks great. And I could see why all these young boxing fans are so impressed. But when you look deep into it, there's no collection of heavyweights like Elmer Ray that these guys had to fight their way up. You could go up to Muhammad Ali times in the 60s and 70s, and those guys that were contenders. The regular George Chuvalo would destroy half of the heavyweights out there today. It's hard to explain, and guys like this, the only way that their memory is alive is from guys like us. And I just hope that some of the young people at least have an interest enough in fighters like Elmer Ray, will they'll at least try to look and learn about him.
And that is what is so disheartening to me in our sport that we love so much, Billy, is the young fight fans today. They see the fighters of today, and they forget about the great. And what makes boxing today is what happened 150 years ago. And in my opinion, this is my opinion. Now, I'm not trying to, get anybody to think the way I think. But if it wasn't for the Elmer Rays, the Joe Lewises, the Georgia Walcotts, these are names that our listeners will recognize, they wouldn't be fights today. You got to remember these great pugilists that stepped between the ropes and put their life on the line. And it scares me when you and I are looking on the other side of the dirt, what kind of fight coverage or what kind of fighters are going to be remembered. I was sitting at ringside the other day, and I just stood there and I just shook my head. I didn't know what to say. A reporter at the fight, at the Dallas fight, looked at me straight in the eye and says, "Chris Arreola is going to go down as one of the greatest heavyweights of our time, of modern time." How do you reply to that? How do you answer that? I mean, I just looked at him. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe he said that. And he meant it. And he wanted me to comment. And I had no comment. I said, "Partner, we have nothing to talk about."
That's when you say.
That's what our history is going to go to when you and I are pushing up daisies or dandelions. I mean, the fight game's in trouble as far as historians go if that's the way it's going to go. I'm not saying it is, but if this one young man, that's his true feelings. He believed what he was saying was correct. And that's so unfortunate and such a shame. The history of our sport is so great. And if you get into the history of boxing, you learn so much more than just boxing. You learn about what went on in that era, why things were done the way they were done, and why there was color lines, and which is unfortunate, and battle royales and all this kind of stuff. And it's just, I don't know, Billy. I don't know where it's going. I just don't know.
Well, I tell you, every generation looks, and they remember what's going on in their life, and in most cases, you always look at the one previous as the last great era, and we've done this, for years and years. I mean, I remember people saying, during Muhammad Ali times, he's nothing like Rocky Marciano. Now we look at it the other way. Same thing with Marvin Hagler and Tommy Hearns. I mean, I never in a million years would have thought that, that was a great era. I just thought it was the norm, But you're right. I mean, when you put it in perspective, and I think today's world is all media based. Everybody wants to touch and feel and see 3D and look at this and full blown color of that, and none of that's available on fighters like Elmer Ray and some of the early fighters, but it is available on Chris Arreola. It is available on Floyd Mayweather and so on. And unfortunately, that's what it's going to boil down to. And even film guys like our mutual friend Steve Lott, even he says, well, how do you put a guy that you can't watch film on? How do you make him so great? What makes you think he's great? You're going to listen to a subjective article that somebody wrote, and at some point in time, I think prior to the technology, you do have to weed out and get the general consensus and put these guys where they are. Now, I'm not saying all old-time fighters need to be put up on a pedestal, but guys like Elmer Ray at least should be remembered. We should at least know what this guy did for the last 40 years of his life. We should at least know something other than we would like to know when he was born, but the tree that they carved his birth certificate on burned down. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's comical. And it wasn't that long ago. That's the part that bothers me. But anyway.
And you're right, Billy. And I don't know, at this minute sitting here talking to you right now, I don't know how to get more information on this man, and I want to, because he was somebody that needs to be remembered. His life needs to be, his story needs to be told, and we can't do it. And there are so many nicknames for him. At one time, his manager, Tom Laughlin, is that what his name was?
Yeah, Tom Laughlin.
Okay. At one time, he wanted to change his name to the Atomic Ray. Some people say he was called Bearcat Ray. Others says he was called Bobcat Ray in his earlier days.
That's right.
But there's no, other than it mentioned, it doesn't go into. I can't find any detail on it. I can't find anything that backs it up. I'm solely talking today on speculation, on bits and pieces, and I know I'm repeating myself, but so many sources say so many different things. I don't know what is correct and what isn't. I really don't. I'm confused on this one prize fighter, and that surprises me, because usually I can nail this kind of stuff down, and I can't on Elmer.
Well, it looks like we can't look forward to a book written by Tony Triem on Elmer Ray.
No. But I don't know enough about him. It's really confusing. And how don't you find it confusing?
Yeah, I do, and I think we need to revisit this, and we should talk about that. But right now, our heavyweight spotlight is overdue. It's over. So we got to think about this for next time. And Elmer Ray, he was our heavyweight spotlight today. Tony Triem was kind enough to give us the skinny on him. 85 wins, according to my record. 85 wins, 63 by knockout, 17 losses, 9 of them by knockout, 5 draws. He lived to 76 years old, 6'2". Incidentally, one last thing I'm going to throw in there. His fight, he was 6'2", and he fought between 186 and 205 pounds. Generally, he fought around the 200-pound limit. Again, seems to be the common size of the better heavyweights of the era. But anyway, Tony, great job with that. I look forward to the next week, my friend.
Thanks, BC. It was fun. I hope that the listeners gain some knowledge out of this, because I'm not sure I did.
Well, I think we basically are giving ourselves a couple of more assignments here. Both Tony and myself will be damned. We're going to learn more about Elmer, whoever he was, Ray. So we're going to look forward to getting an update on Elmer Ray sometime in the future, right?
You bet. I am going to do some research. I'm going to try to find some more out on him because he needs to be remembered and he needs to be brought up to modern times and so what went on in his life and what happened to him after his fight career. That's the real mystery.
Yeah, I agree with you. Tony, thank you, and until next time, my friend, we'll talk soon.
Ciao, my man.
All right, that's Tony Triem in our Heavyweight Spotlight, and hey, I got to take a break. We'll be right back.